Let's examine a song that superimposes both meters on top of each other. You will hear both a duple meter pulse and a triple meter simultaneously. One, two, one, two, one, two, three, one, two, three, one, two, three, one, two, one, two, one, two, three, one, two, three, one, two, one. You probably noticed that the up and down feel of duple meter seems to lend itself to the expression of objectivity. Composers, consciously or unconsciously, tend to favor it for hymns of worship and adoration to God. The circular feeling of triple meter seems more subjective. Gospel songwriters often choose it to set messages of personal testimony. It would be an interesting study sometime to examine your hymn book and observe how common these tendencies are.
Some forms of contemporary music use 7/4 and 5/4 meters. These really alternate patterns of triple and duple, creating a continuous sensation of shifting accents.
Shifted accents are called syncopation. This can occur in two ways. One way is adding an accent where we don't expect to hear it. For example, a 4-beat measure would normally emphasize the first and third beats, like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Do you hear the feel of duple meter? But if we syncopate that, we would add an accent on the second beat where it is normally not heard, like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Another way we can syncopate that same measure is to leave out an accent where it should be, like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. We get the feeling that there is a shifted accent to the second beat, just because the first beat is missing. The strongest type of syncopation is when we do both at the same time. We add a strong second beat and leave out the first. Let's leave out beat 3 and accent beat 4 as well. Listen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 4, 2, 4.
It is not wrong to use syncopation in music. The problem comes with the composer or performer overdoes it. Syncopation is like the salt and pepper of the sound. If a person dumped salt and pepper all over his supper, he would ruin it. But used lightly, it greatly enhances the flavor of the food. Syncopation is the same way. It is the seasoning of the music and must be used very carefully.
The syncopated words of this example actually detract attention from the message. The listener becomes far more conscious of what is happening in the musical performance than he is of the content of the message.
Bless that wonderful name of Jesus. Bless that wonderful name of Jesus. Bless that wonderful name of Jesus.
Let's contrast that with a good text rhythm match, where the background music supports the message.
Notice how the important words are falling on the accented beats. The rhythm of the music is the natural rhythm of these words. A real problem in much contemporary Christian music written today is that the rhythm is dominant, driving the melody and the harmony rather than supporting it.
Rock music is noted for this type of driving rhythm. The syncopation is caused by a strong backbeat and often the presence of a breakbeat as well.
A backbeat is like having a continuous syncopation throughout the song where accents fall on beats 2 and 4 instead of beats 1 and 3 of a 4-beat measure. A breakbeat is a pulse which occurs anywhere between those backbeat accents. In contemporary performances, backbeats are usually so strong that they draw the listener's attention totally away from the message. This example takes a powerful song of testimony and dilutes it with the syncopated background. Notice the strong backbeat? There. In modern recording, the rhythm track is usually laid down first. Then the background instrumentalists add their part, and finally the vocalist comes in to do his part. This procedure is not as complicated and costs less than trying to have everyone in the studio at the same time, but it forces a strong rhythm with little give and take. You see, the soloist can no longer express himself and have the accompaniment follow him as it ought to do, because he's locked into following the rhythm track which is already there. The same thing occurs when singers in church use recorded accompaniments. They end up being driven by the accompaniment rather than leading the accompaniment as they minister. Notice how this performance is dominated by the backbeat and breakbeat of the rhythm track.
There's no light in a car, there's no soul in a guitar. It makes no difference if they sing just or not, 'cause God's kingdom is what I've got. Oh, God's kingdom.
Many people think that strong rhythm tracks are purely a matter of personal taste. They have the attitude that young people tend to like them, and after all, they're entitled to their music. Older people want their sound more mellow, and they're entitled to their music. It would be convenient if this analysis were actually the case.
But it's not. Scientific research has established the fact that rhythm patterns greatly affect the human body.
Experiments done by Dr. John Diamond in behavioral kinesiology identify a certain type of rhythm pattern which actually weakens the physical body. This pattern is known as a stopped anapestic rhythm. It involves a 3-beat figure in which the accent appears on the 3rd beat rather than the 1st. Normally, a 3-beat pattern would go da 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 da. The stopped anapestic rhythm goes da 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 da. The effect of this continued syncopation creates a mix-up in the brain waves, which scientists call switching. Switching produces homolateral movements in a person, the kind where crawling would be done with arms and legs on the same side of the body rather than alternate sides, as a baby would move. Researchers have found that homolateral movements are common in people who listen to rock music a great deal. It is no secret that musical sound itself has tremendous effects on the physical body.
Not all rock music has the stopped anapestic rhythm pattern. It has been found in only 2 classical compositions where the composer set out to create chaos. One is the finale of Igor Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. History records that the original performance of this work resulted in a massive riot and the destruction of the concert hall where it was heard. The Wichita Eagle Beacon reported Dr. Diamond's work with this quote, "The reason this beat is so bad is that it's the opposite of human physiology. The heart and the blood both have strong first beat rhythm patterns. The rock beat is the opposite of biological rhythms, and I think it triggers off some warning message to the body that something's going wrong." Close quote. Dr. Diamond said that the body responds to the message with muscle weakness, anxiety, and aggressiveness, and a craving for more of the beat. His conclusion was that the rock beat is probably subjecting us to the most serious form of pollution we have.
Other laboratory studies have examined the effects of the strong rhythms of rock music on living things by studying plants and mice. The plant studies revealed that growth was inhibited when constant exposure to rock music was the designated environment. The studies involving mice presented awesome conclusions. Mice exposed to a constant listening agenda of rock music lost learning and memory capability because the sound caused a wild growth of unconnected neurons at the base of the brain where learning and memory are controlled. The damage was irreparable, and the scientists concluded that since mice and men both have mammalian brains, it is highly likely that rock music would affect human beings in the same manner.
Our physical bodies actually fight to pull things to regular accents. Listen to these examples of familiar hymns in which the rhythms are syncopated just for a new kick to the sound. Notice how your body responds to the move.
Joyful, joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of love. Awesome like flowers before thee, looking to the sun above. Melt the clouds of sin and sadness, drive the dark of doubt.
This next example does not have any rock rhythms in it. All it does is move some very unimportant syllables of the text to major accented beats. Is the message enhanced by this treatment of the rhythm?
Let's examine a positive use of syncopation. Notice how the main melody and text are enhanced by the syncopated counter melody. The men start with a melody, and the ladies have a syncopated counter melody. Then the ladies have the main melody, and the men answer with the syncopated counter melody. The tension builds to a point where all voices join in to sing the primary melody. The result is an emphasis on the words, "Dying once, he all doth save," when the voices join in singing together.
The strong rhythms of rock music and much contemporary Christian music go hand in hand with the next element of music, volume.
When we deal with volume, we are actually dealing with dynamics. Dynamics relates to the volume and scientific properties of a sound, its generation, propagation, length, timbre, and effect on people.
The science of acoustics demonstrates great mathematical precision and points to the careful design of our omniscient Creator. For example, the tuning standard for the orchestra is A equals 440 vibrations per second. To sound the A an octave lower, half the vibrations are required, 220. To sound the octave higher, double the vibrations are needed, 880.
The intensity of a sound is measured in units called decibels. Decibels increase in intensity on a logarithmic basis rather than arithmetically. This means that a sound of 10 decibels transmits 10 times as much energy as a 0 decibel sound. A 20 decibel sound is heard at 100 times the intensity of a 0 decibel sound. The threshold of audibility is at 0. Look at the chart on the bottom of page 15 in your booklet. Other common noise levels are recorded for you there. A whisper is 13 decibels, and the noise level of an average home is approximately 35 decibels. The noise in a typing room of an office building is about 65 decibels, and the noise level 30 feet away from a riveting machine would be about 100 decibels. Then we come to a bar which reports the threshold of feeling. Acoustical engineers will tell you, and doctors will confirm, that you will begin to get very uncomfortable when you hear sounds of 120 decibels or more. In fact, you will be in outright pain at 140 decibels. The intensity of that sound level would be like standing 100 feet away from a jet engine as the airplane took off. Dr. Diamond's research pointed out that the same muscle weakening response which occurred with the stopped anapestic rhythm would result above certain decibel levels regardless of the rhythmic patterns involved.
Sound affects the physical body and can actually be used to deaden pain. The practice of audio analgesia is becoming fairly common in dentist offices. It works like this. A sound control is placed in the patient's lap. When the pain starts, the patient is to turn up the volume until the pain stops. Reports say this technique will allow 80% of the population to go through treatment without any anesthesia.
Continual exposure to sound above 85 decibels will jeopardize your hearing ability. Research findings indicate that live rock concerts are often performed at decibel levels above 120, sometimes as high as 140, and a few reports have gone to 160. Measurements taken at nightclubs and discotheques range from 110 to 116. Some contemporary Christian rock concerts have been noted as high as 110 decibels.
Another fascinating aspect of sound is sympathetic vibration. It works this way. Sympathetic vibration is the acoustical property in which the sound from a source is able to set into motion or vibration any object around it, which is compatible with it.
When you play a violin, the vibrating string causes the wood and the airspace inside and around it to vibrate in multiples of the original frequency. This provides much of the resonance for the instrument, and apart from this principle, you wouldn't be able to hear the sound at all. In fact, your eardrum was designed by the Creator to vibrate in sympathy with certain ranges of sound. God designed sound so that living creatures would be able to respond to it.
Many people argue that a musical sound is morally neutral and simply a vehicle to carry text. Laboratory experiments in acoustics strongly refute that argument.
The Chicago Sun-Times reported that scientists were doing some unusual work in establishing a connection between musical sound and the structure of DNA. the genetic code known as the stuff of life. After having computers translate the DNA code of various substances into musical notation, the researchers had orchestras play the scores. Music corresponding to the DNA of lactose, a milk substance, sounded like a lullaby, while music corresponding to the DNA of cancer genes actually resembled Chopin's funeral march.
As far back as the mid-60s, rock performers were telling their audiences, and anyone else who would listen, that their sound was designed to communicate rebellion. Life magazine carried this description by Frank Zappa in June of 1968. Quote, "The big beat matches the great rhythms of the human body. I knew that the teenagers would carry this with them for the rest of their lives. Responding like dogs, some of the kids began to go for the throat. Open rebellion. To deny rock music its place in society was to deny sexuality." Unquote. The bottom line is that the rhythms and volume of rock music were specifically designed to be the sound of the countercultural, symbolizing the rebelliousness of young people of the 60s, not only to their parents, but towards all authorities as well. The people who created this sound knew what it was and deliberately set out to infect America's young people with it. Rock music always travels in a quartet. Its partners are drugs, immorality, and rebellion.
Let's summarize the characteristics of rock music, so there is no misunderstanding of what this type of music is. You have a summary on the top of page 18 of your booklet. There are many kinds of rock music, but they all share three basic characteristics. 1. Excessive repetition of a melodic phrase, chordal pattern, rhythmic pattern, or a combination of those. 2. A dominant beat, often driving in nature. And 3. Intense volume. Add to that the fact that the words are rarely sung. They are screamed to rise above the high decibel level of the accompaniment. Some contemporary Christian artists make no bones about it. They call themselves rock bands and bill themselves as giving rock concerts. Listen to this example. All the elements of rock music are present in it.
The world is looking for a revelation. We're always under their investigation.
Others are much more subtle, claiming to enjoy all forms of expressing themselves to the Lord, but the results are plain in the sound.
Shine down your light on me. Let the people see. In your presence, darkness flee. Father of light, shine down on me.
Ironically enough, the theme of many of today's contemporary Christian artists is living the Christian life in such a way that the world can tell that you are born again. They emphasize the need for a message that is real in the life of the one who professes to believe.
That reminds me of a clever wordplay. It went something like this. Your walk talks and your talk talks, but your walk talks louder than your talk talks. Our actions, and in this case our sounds, communicate more loudly than our words.
Rock music, its sounds and all that it represents, should not be part of a Christian's life, no matter who performs or writes the songs.
The last element we want to consider before we break for the next tape is form. Form is defined as the arrangement of the parts to achieve the best possible effect.
Form is even more important in music than it is in the visual arts. Now, Inga, explain that.
In a visual piece of art, you are able to view the entire work at one time. The whole thing is before you, whether it be the architecture of a building or the elements of a painting. You can recognize the design of the whole with even a quick glance. But in music, you have to remember the first theme so that you can relate it to the second theme. Then you relate that to whatever happens later and recompose the form or design in your mind from memory.
The basic law of musical form is repetition and contrast. The composer repeats his material to help the listener grasp meaning. But if there is constant repetition, the work soon becomes boring. So, the writer introduces new material.
If he keeps on providing new material, however, the listeners will become disoriented.
Balance is necessary, just like in all the other elements. Repetition creates a sense of unity. Contrast gives variety.
Repetition brings relaxation. Contrast creates tension. A well-written piece of music will have a definite beginning place, build to a peak, and communicate a definite sense of conclusion. A common broadcasting technique is the fade-out, which allows a piece of music to dominate a person subconsciously for quite a while after the airing, because it was never completed in the listener's mind.
Some groups achieve that same effect by repeating their last phrase several times as the fade-out occurs.
That's one of the problems of subliminal influence, which Christians should be alert to reject in their listening choices. One final comment about form. The whole is actually greater than the sum of its parts. Similar to baking a cake, when you're finished combining the flour, sugar, eggs, vanilla, and shortening, you bake it, and the end product is a totally new entity, which doesn't resemble any of the individual ingredients you added to create it. Music is the same way. The end product, the musical composition, as it is performed, is its own entity, greater than just the addition of the elements within it.
The chart on page 20 summarizes the elements of music we have discussed thus far. You'll notice that the primary requirement in using each one is balance. Melodies must have balance in the rise and fall of their lines. Harmonies must be controlled in the use of dissonance and consonance. Rhythms must be strong enough to give life to the music, yet not so strong that they dominate its message. Volume levels should never be allowed to harm the physical capabilities God has given each of us. And balance in the repetition and contrast of form is necessary to make any artistic work meaningful. The chart also lays the groundwork for the last two elements, text and performance. We will discuss these on the next tape.